Today's tutorial is about how to use colored pencils like a pro, not like you're coloring a coloring book. The first tip for you is add value to your shapes. I have drawn a pear on this paper. I could just take this green colored pencil right here and go to town, color the whole thing green, call it a day. But we're trying to make this colored like it's not a coloring book. We're amping it up, y'all. So I'm going to start by thinking about value. A pear is a three-dimensional object, meaning that there is going to be light shining on it, and the light that is shining on it is not going to be shining on the back of the pear, the side that is further away from the light. Whatever the light is in your drawing, it is called a light source. A light source can be anything. It can be a sun, a moon, a lamp, or it can even be something that's not even on your paper. As long as you have the light source in your head and you're thinking about it, then being able to add value to your shapes shouldn't be too hard. Right now, I'm thinking about how the right side of my pear is going to be darker than the left side because my pretend lamp is shining on the left side of the pear. So by thinking about value, I'm already making my objects look more three-dimensional and less flat like a coloring book. If you don't believe me, look at this example. Here we have a drawing of a person looking at some animals in an area, but we don't see very much detail. We don't see any shadows. We don't see any value. Here's the same exact drawing, but now suddenly we see value. We see shadows, we see light source, and it makes things look way more three-dimensional. Just filling in your shapes with no value makes it look flat. It makes it look like a coloring book. So while I am coloring in my pear, the next tip that I have for you is don't press so hard. Don't press so hard with your colored pencils. If you do that, then you end up with a pear like this one. I've been pressing really hard on this one to try to color it in as hard as I can. It makes my hand hurt, and it also makes you more likely to accidentally mess up. There's no reason to press so hard. It kind of kills your colored pencil too. When you press lighter, not so hard, you can always go back and add a little bit more if you need to, but it doesn't kill your hand, and then it makes our next step much easier. The next thing to think about is shadows. Shadows are not just something that we see on the ground underneath our feet. Shadows happen on all objects. When you are looking at an object in a space that has light shining on it, there are shadows on the object. Don't believe me? Look at this bowl. This bowl is sitting in front of me on my desk, and inside of it you can see there are shadows. There are shadows inside of the bowl, and there's also a shadow underneath the bowl. These are all just different types of shadows. So if I want to add a shadow on my pear, not just underneath it on the ground, then I need to think about what I want to use to make that shadow. Which brings us to our next tip. Shadows are not just black. When you look at this green bowl in here, the shadow that we see on the side is not black. It's just darker green. Check out this one. This bowl is blue. It also has a shadow on it, and the shadow is just a darker blue. When you're looking at an object, the shadows that you see are the same color as that object, just darker. So here, I've got a dark green colored pencil. I can add a shadow on my pear using this dark green colored pencil. Again, not pressing too hard because we know that one of our tips was not to press so hard. And I am able to make a shadow on the side of my pear, on the side that is farther away from my light source, using this darker green color right on top, which is our next tip. Layer the colors. So here I've got dark green that I'm layering over the top of light green. Layering a darker color over a lighter color is a nice way to add a shadow to an object that you're coloring. But you can also go the other direction. Here I've got yellow. I can layer some yellow on top of it all. Yellow is a nice light color. I love using it somewhere around the lighter side of one of my objects, like a pear, whatever it is that I'm drawing. So I am putting yellow on top of the lighter green I'm still pressing lightly, adding layers and layers of color until slowly we start to see something that's got some three-dimensionality to it. Now, there are shadows underneath an object, but remember what I said earlier. Whatever surface your object is sitting on, the shadow should be the same color as that surface, just darker. My hand is sitting on this table. That means that the shadow next to it, the cast shadow, is just a darker color of the table. So let's say my pear is sitting on a table. It's going to have a shadow underneath it. It's going to be a darker brown than my table. If my light is coming from this direction, because my light source is over here, my shadow is going to be shining the opposite direction. So my cast shadow is going to go below my pear. So we've layered colors. We've thought about light and value. We've thought about not pressing so hard. And the next thing that I want to talk about is texture. If you want to add texture to something, texture can help make it look even more real. The texture on the pear right now looks pretty smooth, right? If I really wanted to, I could use another color to go in and make it look a little more beaten up. I can add some details that make it look like it's scuffed up. It's got some spots on it, some bruises, because we know that not all pears are perfect. This just helps it seem even more realistic and like an actual pear that might be in front of you by adding texture. Texture can also go on the table underneath my pear. Maybe my table is wood and it's got texture to it. But remember, layering your colors is also going to help. So I can even go in, find a darker brown to add a wood texture to my table underneath my pear. Putting a darker layer of brown right underneath my pear also helps it feel like it's actually sitting on that surface. And so now we've got some texture going on. Texture is helpful in a lot of areas. Back to this example, you can see more texture on the wood fence because I've gone over it with a darker brown. You can see texture on the garage door because I've gone over it with a darker color. Texture on the trash can because I've gone over it with a darker color. If you keep everything flat, it looks like a coloring book. And we know that that is not our goal. So while you're working with your colored pencils, don't forget all of our tips. Show value. Value is going to help make it feel more three-dimensional. Don't press so hard. If you press really hard with those colored pencils, it makes your hands hurt. It also will make it easier to accidentally mess up. Remember shadows. They're not just on the ground. They're also on the object. But also, shadows aren't just black. Don't forget to layer your colors and add texture. If I have a drawing like this one, I have a baseball sitting in the grass. I can add shadows on my object. I'm pressing really lightly with a black colored pencil because the only reason I would be using black is if it's on an object that's white or gray, because black is just a darker value of white or gray. I'm also thinking about not pressing so hard. I'm thinking about shadows. I'm thinking about layering. What about the cast shadow underneath it? The baseball is sitting in grass, so the shadow underneath it on the grass, the cast shadow, shouldn't be black. I'm going to use dark green instead and see how that works. I'm adding texture by being rough with the way that I am putting lines on my paper using the colored pencil. And by doing that, it makes it seem just a little bit more real. So now my shadow that is behind my baseball is a darker green, so it doesn't seem like it's so flat. I can also go in and add some of this darker green mixed into my grass to add even more texture so that it doesn't seem like everything is just one solid color. Hopefully, these were some good tips to help you remember how to use color pencils like a pro so that your stuff doesn't just look like a coloring book.